Hello, students. This is an analysis of the essay of Mimicry and Man Ambivalence of Colonial Discourse by Homi Bhabha. Mimicry in colonial and post colonial literature is most commonly seen when members of a colonized society imitate the language, dress, politics, or cultural attitude of their colonizers. Under colonialism and in the context of immigration, mimicry is seen as an opportunistic pattern of behavior because the colonials or migrants copy the person in power because they hope to have access to that power. While copying the master, one has to intentionally suppress one's own cultural identity. Though there are many cases where immigrants and colonial subjects are so confused by their cultural encounter with a dominant foreign culture that they may not have a pre-existing cultural identity to suppress. Mimicry is often seen as something shameful. A black or brown person engaging in mimicry is usually made fun of by other members of his or her group for doing so. There are quite a number of colloquial insults to refer to mimicry, such as coconut, Oreo, etc. Coconut is a term used to describe a brown person who behaves like he is white. Oreo is a term for black person who imitates a white person. The reverse of this is also possible. A term vigor, Wigger, is a term used to refer to a white man imitating black or brown person. Though mimicry is very important concept in thinking about the relationship between colonizing and colonized people, and many people have been historically derided as mimics or mimic men, it is interesting that almost no one ever describes himself or herself as positively engaged in mimicry. Because mimicry is shameful, nobody accepts that they are imitating others. Mimicry is frequently invoked with reference to the Bintu. Here, Bintu means somebody who has traveled to the West, returned home, and behaves like a foreigner as if some change has taken place. Frantz Fanon makes fun of such characters in his book Black Skin, White Mask. Mimicry, though it is shameful, is not all bad, says Bhabha in his essay of Mimicry and Man. Bhabha describes mimicry as sometimes unintentionally subversive. Bhabha's way of thinking is derived from Jacques Derrida's deconstructive reading of J.L. Austin's idea of performative. Mimicry is a kind of performance that exposes the artificiality of all symbolic expressions of power. In other words, if an Indian is imitating an Englishman, he will be imitating a particular code. For example, in the case of Baka in the novel Untouchable, Baka is obsessed with the solar topi which he wants to own. But we come to know that none of the British masters know who that topi belongs to. So, British colonial obsession with solar topi is an example wherein the performance of those codes might show how hollow the codes really are. While that may well be plausible, in fact, the colonial and post colonial literature, this particular dynamic is not seen very often. We cannot see this kind of a subversion in literature often, since there are many more direct methods that are there. So, there is another much more straightforward way in which mimicry can actually be subversive or empowering when it involves the copying of Western concepts of justice, freedom, and rule of law. For example, in Foster's Passage to India, there is a character by name Mr. Amrit Rao, who is a lawyer from Calcutta, and the British Anglo Indians are afraid of him, not because he is unfair, but due to his education. He has a very good knowledge of British law, and he knows that the rules apply both to Indians as well as Britishers. So, as a foreign educated English speaking Indian lawyer in colonial India, he may be mocked as a mimic man or babu, but it may be that mockery covers over a defensive fear that the British legal system is not quite as fair as it should be. Mr. Amrit Rao is aware of the loopholes in British legal system. Therefore, the British Anglo-Indians are afraid of him. Indeed, the example of Amrit Rao in Foster's novel might lead to a broader political discussion. Many anti colonial nationalist movements in India, Asia, Africa emerged out of what might be thought of as a mimicry of Western political ideas. The historian Partha Chatterjee argued that Indian nationalism emerged as a derivative discourse, by which he means it is a copy of Western nationalism adapted to the Indian context. Over time, the derivative ideas of justice, democracy, and equality, as they were used by activists, tended to get adapted to a local culture. Now, the person who used it at its best was Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. He took symbols of Indian aestheticism and simplicity, such as traditional Indian dress and fabric, along with progressive Western concepts of socialism, and used that new fusion of ideas to mobilize the masses of ordinary Indians, most of whom had little direct contact with the British. Through Gandhi, Indian nationalism, which may have started as a derivative of nationalism of the West, became something distinctively and uniquely Indian. So, this is the positive impact of mimicry, according to Partha Chatterjee. Reverse mimicry in the colonial context was often referred to as going native. Though mimicry is almost always used in post colonial studies with reference to colonials and immigrant minorities imitating white cultural and linguistic norms, this is known as passing up. Mimicry could also be reversed. That is, we have always seen the immigrants or colonial subjects imitating their masters, but the reverse of this, that is, the foreign masters imitating brown or black people, is also possible. Mimicry could also be reversed. especially since there are so many examples in the history of British colonialism, especially of British subjects who either disguised themselves as Indians or Africans or fantasized of doing so. The famous example of passing down or reverse mimicry might be Richard Francis Burton, who often attempted to disguise himself as Arab or Indian during his time as a colonial administrator. In literature, also, there are many examples of passing down. For example, Rudyard Kipling's Kim, who is an Irish child orphan who grows up in the wild on the streets of Lahore outside the reach of British society. Though Kipling's interest in passing down does not overcome the numerous mean spirited and racial statements Kipling made about Indians throughout his career, the thought of being able to break out of his identity as an Anglo Indian and live like a native does seemingly reflect a real affection and a sense of excitement about Indian culture. There are examples by other writers also of this kind of reverse mimicry. For example, Kurtz in Joseph Conrad's novel Heart of Darkness. Now, a short note on hybridity. By contrast to mimicry, which is a relatively fixed and limited idea, post colonial hybridity can be quite slippery and broad. At a basic level, hybridity refers to any mixing of East and Western culture. Within colonial and post colonial literature, it is most commonly refers to colonial subjects from Asia, Africa, who have found a balance between Eastern and Western cultural attributes. However, in Homi Bhabha's initial use of the term in his essay, Science Taken for Wonders, he clearly thought of hybridity as a subversive tool whereby colonized people might challenge various forms of oppression. However, the term hybridity, which relies on a metaphor from biology, is commonly used in much more broader ways to refer to any kind of cultural mixing or mingling between East and West. As it is commonly used, this more general sense of hybridity has many limitations. Hybridity, defined as a cultural mixing in general, does not help us explicitly account for the many different paths by which someone can come to embody a mix of Eastern and Western attributes, nor does it differentiate between people who have consciously striven to achieve a mixed or balanced identity and those who accidentally reflect it. Hybridity defined this way also seems a rather awkward term to describe people who are racially mixed, such as Eurasians in the British Raj in India, or biracial or multiracial people all round the post colonial world. Though it is most commonly deployed in the context of Indian or African societies that take on influence from the West, one needs to account how hybridity, like mimicry, can run in reverse. That is to say, It can describe how Western cultures can be inflected by Asian or African elements. It seems important to note that there can be very different registers of hybridity from slight mixing to very aggressive instances of cultural clash. For all these reasons, it may not be that useful to speak of hybridity in general. What might be more helpful in thinking about different hybridities, a set of differentiated subcategories: 1. Racial, 2. Linguistic, 3. Literary, 4. Cultural, 5. Religious. The main subcategories are really linguistic, literary, and cultural, where linguistic and literary overlap closely. So, in what follows, we will just quickly see what these concepts mean in very short words. So, racial hybridity derives from biology, and the norm among scholars is to de emphasize biological or genetic race in favor of culture. Literary hybridity, it is fundamental to post colonial literature. Novel has an incredibly flexible and open format. Magic Realism by Salman Rushdie is an example for literary hybridity. Linguistic hybridity refers to elements from foreign languages that enter a given language, such as there are many Asian words or Indian words which have seeped into English language, like pajamas, bangla, mulligatawny, and mumbo jumbo, etc. So there are also writers who have wrote back to the British canon, like Anne Caesar, Jean Rice, and Taib Sully. The above writers take basic plot and form from British narratives and invoke Africa or Caribbean, but write them from an African or Caribbean point of view. So, all these are examples of different kinds of hybridities that were mentioned in the last slide. Thank you.